Hi, Marc Warnke here, PackGoats.com. Hey, I want to speak to you about, people constantly ask me what's the best breed for a packer. The answer is there isn't one. There are breeds that I avoid and there are breeds that I prefer, but what I prefer more is body type. How does the body type lend itself? And then secondarily, I look at the breed because there's tendencies and personalities in the breed and in body form. But in the dairy breeds, as a majority of time, there's kind of some set rules, and so I kind of play them both. So the answer to that question is none. Now, if you made me press against the corner and pick my two favorites, it's La Manchas and Alpines. I like both of them a lot. I love that cross. This is an example of an Alpine, and he's big. This is Smudge. He's new this year. He's in the 230s, 240s. I picked him up as an adult, and he's super sweet. He doesn't have an aggressive bone in his body. The reputation that Alpines have is that they're really aggressive. And I personally don't feel that that's a fair depiction of that breed. I think that some Alpine breeds can be, and I've seen some goats that I've had that are Alpines that are super buttholes and pounding other goats, and that does happen. But as a general rule, I think you would be crossing them off the list if you called them an aggressive goat, that they only did that because they don't. So I think they should still be on your list. Alpines, as a general rule, will have a tendency to be more oriented towards being a herd boss or a string leader when you get them grouped up. Yes, I see you. And I think that they should be in every pack string. I think Alpines are a really solid breed. This is an example of an Alpine Oberhalsey cross. I really love that cross. I really love Oberhalseys. Problem with Oberhalseys is, as a general rule, they're small, and because they're small, they don't make as good of packers, but I love their agility and I love their attitude. So if you want me to have a purpose about it, in being an Oberhalsey, being one of my favorite breeds, it is. It's just I'm also going to acknowledge that they're going to have a tendency to be a little smaller, but their agility level is really good, and they're just super, super neat goats in terms of personality. And I really love it when you cross it. So you kind of get an Alpine with the Alpine flavor, but you get that kindness and that gentleness of an Oberhalsey, but you still get the size and agility. So that's a nice cross. So we've spoken about Alpines, we've spoken about Obers. I would pick those every time. If we go with pure Obers, generally as a rule, you're going to get a smaller goat. They're considered a medium breed. Again, I think we make a mistake in the pack goat world to think that bigger is better and that everything should be huge. I don't agree with that. We do need endurance athletes. I think goats in that really nice 190 to 240. If I consistently survey the pack goat community and ask people what their favorite goat is, it is rarely the giant. It's always one of those smaller goats that just never gives up. So we've talked about Oberhalseys. We've talked about Alpines. We've talked about a little bit of the crosses as well. I also really have a sweet spot for La Manchas, and the La Manchas are just I find them highly intelligent. Their hooves are really solid. Their bone structure is really solid. You know, I am almost a bigger La Mancha fan than I am an Alpine fan because they got a lot of really positive elements. So I think you'd be making a mistake by not having La Manchas in your string as well. Those breeds and those three breeds mixed are the cornerstone of the majority of goats that I have. I'm not a super big fan of Toggenburg. Toggenburg has a tendency to be everyone I've had an experience with has been kind of a strange goat. They haven't seemed to have had a whole lot of personality, and I've seen that be a problem. That said, there could be some great togs out there. It's just one that I choose to avoid because I think it's kind of risky, at least in my percentage of success with that breed has been low, and they're smaller, so I've chosen just to kind of almost ignore that breed in my pack goat string. The other two, and Sonnens. Now, I really like Sonnens and crosses, but I like Sables better because Sables have the color, and I'm just not a big fan of a big white goat. In terms of probably personal aesthetic preferences, but their tendency towards things like, skin-related issues because they're white. Also, Sonnens are not super heat tolerant. I really like the Sables. They seem to be like a nice cross. There's something that's different in them. I've had good luck with them. I am newer in my testing, but I wouldn't shy away from a Sable, and I think you're going to get the size and the attitude out of them as well. They're really a gentle breed. I like them in terms of attitude. We get into the meat breeds, and the meat breeds I think are where we really need to be cautious. Now, one of the things I really love, go on, get. That's one of the best tools, by the way, to get a goat to move, is you move them by their tail. One of the things that you want with the meat breeds to be cautious of is meat breeds are bred to eat and grow. And that's good on one end, but then you have a goat that you have difficulty keeping thin. And fat goats make bad pack goats. They just do. So if you're going to exercise heavily and you're going to be conditioning a lot and you're willing to limit feed, which becomes difficult when you have guys you're trying to grow up and guys that are adults, then I think the meat breeds have some nice aspects to them. They have really good hooves. They have really good bone structure. Their negative side is that they have a tendency to get fat, and they, as a general rule, won't be very leggy. Because of that, I don't think they're optimal pack goat breeds. I think maybe a little bit of mix, like a 1/8 or 1/4 at most of some meat in there, can kind of give them some musculature, as long as you still get the height and you don't get that big 55-gallon drum barrel body and short legs. If you're getting that and you're mixing in meat, then I think you're going to have trouble with the endurance of that. The negative is their tendency to grow fast and to put on weight, and that will carry through to their adulthood, and you'll have trouble with having a goat that gets fat every winter. They also have a tendency to not have the body dimensions that I'm looking for. Super leggy, thin upper body. They're built completely different than that. And then the last thing that's a concern, and this will show up in other breeds as well, so it's certainly not only them, is that big horn flare. Horn flare is difficult to work with on a pack goat because when you're working on their side of them, they have a horn sticking out here. If they turn their head, that's in your ribs. They also have a tendency to be fairly that way with other goats in the trailer, and that sideways horn motion is dangerous for other goats, and I'm cautious of it. And also, goats will have a tendency to want to pass you closely, and if they have a big horn flare, that horn flare catches you. They have that tendency. And then the last thing that I really want to acknowledge that I found in a difference in the meat breeds is that, as a rule, and there may be exceptions to this, but the ones I've had experience with is they haven't been very smart. They're just not a very smart breed. They're kind of like my roving village idiot. It is my dairy breeds that are much smarter goats in figuring out problems, but that can create a problem as well. They're the ones that are always figuring out the ways around a gate. They're the ones who are figuring out how to take equipment off. They know how to take care of other systems, and sometimes intelligence can be your enemy, but most of the time you want a smart goat that can figure out his way through problems, and I find that the meat breeds just aren't as smart. Now, all that said, there are people who are super partial to some breeds, and there are breeders that are specific to certain breeds. And I really want to acknowledge some of the other breeders in there. Karen Kopp, Ann Somerton, Kim Helms, Nate Putnam. All these guys are doing a great job of breeding what they breed. I think Ann Somerton and Kim Helms have a tendency to breed kind of in the way that I'm breeding for. I think they're looking for legs. They're looking for those dimensions. I think they're producing some good stock. I think that Nate and Karen are making some really good, what I would call like amicable trail goats that have a tendency to be a little bit slower and a little bit more meat oriented because they choose Kiko and Boer as the cornerstone of their genetics. But that has a strength for certain people as well. Not everybody's going to do 500 miles. Not everybody's a super hardcore. And some people just want to pack a lunch into high elevations. And Boers and Kikos are super sweet breeds that have their uniqueness as well. And they can be beautiful and have great personalities. And a guy like Nate is crossing them with dairy and getting kind of some neat bovine combinations and that sort of thing as well. So I really want to acknowledge publicly that I don't think any breeders are doing it wrong. There's just a mixed recipe, and at the same time, none of us actually for sure know, including me. I think we're guessing, and I think we have multiple generations to still pay attention to. I think Dwight Sharp laid down the foundation of a lot of thinking. I think he was breeding towards really, really big goats, and now even him, he's starting to see the wisdom in trying to breed more for that, that 190 to 240, that athletic middle of the road, going to last a long time, going to have high endurance, has good legs to cover ground, and that sort of thing. So I think people get pretty hung up on the actual breed, and they should get more hung up on conformation, breeder, genetics, and the other things that are at play in this as well. So again, I hope you find this helpful. A lot of this information can be found in a very detailed course on PackGoats.com, and it's PackGoat 101. We also have a course on how to raise babies, and we have courses if you're looking to get into milkers, which, by the way, I think you all should do. Goat milk is ambrosia, and having the babies and that relationship with a backcountry milker or just a milker on your farm, I think will be a massive addition to your family, and I can't say enough about having a milker. I've had milkers for a long time. But all those courses can be found on PackGoats.com, and then everything's organized and all in one place. But I hope you found this helpful, and I know I was a little wordy, and I apologize about that, but I do believe it's a subject that deserves, plenty of attention and plenty of conversation. So I hope you find that helpful. Marc Warnke, the Goat Guy, signing out.